And so I grew up in Orange County. I went to UCLA for undergrad, so I know the LA area fairly well. And I went up to San Francisco. So I was at med school at UCSF, and I spent 4 years there, and I was trying to figure out what kind of doctor do I want to be, and I said, maybe pediatrics is for me. So I did pediatric residency. I went out to Boston Children's Hospital for pediatrics. And then I came back to LA. I actually came to Children's Hospital LA, around the corner from here. And I was there for 3 years, and I did infectious disease training. So this is now 10 years into my decision to be a doctor. 4 years, 3 years, 3 years. And then after that, I was trying to think, okay, what's the next step? And I said, okay, maybe I'll go and do some public health. So I went out to the CDC, Centers for Disease Control. And I spent 2 years there, did outbreak investigations, and worked on vaccine research. And it was fun. I had a really nice time out there in Atlanta. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next with my life. And so at the time, I was in public health. And my fiance had come across Khan Academy. And she said, there's this thing, kind of like the spiel I just gave you. It's really fun, interesting. You should look into it. And I've used it, she said, for calculus. And I think it's awesome. It's really good. The videos are very, very understandable. And I bet you'd really enjoy it because you've always talked about how you like medical education. I said, okay, well, let me give it a try. So I started watching the videos. And they have a handful of medical videos, but not that many. And I was thinking, well, this is really a huge opportunity because if you can get medical content out to a lay audience, that's profound. I mean, that's what I spend my whole life doing, except I don't feel like I have a really good setting to do it in because, as a pediatrician, you don't get a lot of time. But almost everything I do is education, and I don't think people outside of pediatrics might appreciate that. Almost everything I do is education. For example, in infectious disease, I might have a patient taking meds. And I've got to talk to them about why these meds are important, what are the side effects of these meds, because and it's related to prevention as well, because if I don't tell them about side effects, let's say nausea, vomiting are the side effects, and they don't know that. That's education, right? They don't know that. They come back in a month later and their liver is failing because they didn't know to come in when they had nausea, vomiting. They thought it was a stomach bug. And so, again, I have to really drill that home and make sure that they understand that these meds cause nausea, vomiting, come in early, prevent having a major liver issue. Other patients on TB meds will say, well, I feel better. I don't need to take these every day. There's so many of them. Forget it, I'm going to stop. And then they come back in with resistant TB. And so I want to prevent that from happening as well. So it's all prevention. It's really frustrating that people have these horrible diseases, and almost every single time you can point to something they could have done earlier that would have prevented that. Sometimes you can't, but most of the time you can. And I got to keep a hold on this. And then the other thing is vaccine. This is another thing, guys. It's so amazing how much of my time and effort goes into explaining vaccines. People say, well, I've never heard of measles. I don't even know what mumps is. Rubella, what? And you're like, well, the MMR vaccine, it's a good vaccine. This is why it's safe. And I'm like, well, I heard it causes autism. It doesn't cause autism. It's actually a very safe vaccine. But I spend so much time explaining that. And there are other things like flu vaccine. This is flu season. We're actually going through a huge epidemic here in California. And people are still not getting the flu vaccine because they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just the flu. Who cares? And so there's a lot of education around. I'm sure some of you are thinking, oh, I didn't get my flu vaccine. And so there's a lot of education that goes on around vaccines as well. And the last image that came up earlier, but this is food and exercise. I mean, everything boils down to this nowadays. I mean, I can't even think of the last time I really didn't feel like I had to talk about nutrition and exercise with a patient. I may not have because other things took precedence, but almost every kid has some nutrition or exercise issue. And so talking about this is paramount, right? Because this stuff leads to sleep apnea or, body image issues or heart disease later in life or liver problems. So everything boils down to good nutrition, good exercise, and prevention. And it's funny because if I'm given, this is completely realistic, if I'm given 20 minutes to see a patient, they'll say, okay, see this gentleman right here for 20 minutes, okay? If I go in there and he tells me his problems, that takes about 10 minutes. And then I have to do my physical exam. That takes about 6 minutes. And then I have a couple follow-up questions. That's about 2 minutes. And I have 2 more minutes on my mental clock before I have to go see that man. And so I have 2 minutes to kind of explain something to him. And it's all sound bites. It's, well, eat vegetables. Or, gosh, make sure you, do your best to floss every day. And, make sure you don't give your baby honey before they turn 1. I mean, all these kind of sound bites. But honey before 1, floss every day? What's the reason? What about fluoride in water? What about... There's all this educational opportunity that's lost because I get 2 minutes with that person and then I have to go run to someone else. And they get cheated, and I get cheated as well because I felt like I really wanted to explain something to them. It's unfortunate. And so all that stuff, all that talk about prevention gets really, really short shrift. You get really no time to do it. And it's really frustrating because I can understand, that's what this slide is, how people feel when they leave my office. Every single time I watch them, and their face is confused, they're lost, they're perplexed, they're not going to remember anything I said. And these little sound bites I'm giving them, like, oh, just make sure you wash your hands through the flu season. Okay, why? Why am I, what? Why would I do that? Cover my mouth? Yeah, I'll remember that for 5 seconds, and I'll forget it. And so if you can't explain the why to people, nothing else will stick. And that's what, sadly, that's what a lot of prevention has boiled down to. Sound bites and the why of why we do anything is lost. We just don't have time for it. So that's my biggest frustration, is that I recognize education is important. I recognize that education ties to prevention, but it's all sound bites, and it's really, really pathetic.